Chapter 2356, The Mad Tyrant 1. Mad Owl's shadow erosion ability caused a great deal of trouble for everyone. Even if King Arthur and others unleash powerful alien energy, that power will be eroded. Mad Tyrant's ability index is at least 50,000 points. For the vast majority of those with abilities below, this is a dimensional reduction attack. But Zhang Yi was the only exception. With an ability index of 45,000, his defensive power exceeds the 50,000 point limit. You are indeed an interesting fellow. If I were to subdue you, I believe the demon god would be very pleased. After speaking, Kuang Shao leaped down from the mountain. He raised his great sword in midair, and the sky suddenly darkened. A faint rumble of thunder roared, and thick black clouds formed a huge vortex. Shadows will eventually shroud everything. I offer everything as a sacrifice to the Supreme Lord of Wrath. Splash. That ink that can turn everything into 2 dimensions rains down from the sky like a torrential downpour, attacking everything on the ground indiscriminately. Gungnir, the Eternal Spear. After Odin conjured a spear of thunder, he immediately formed a claw shape with his left hand. Devouring all things, eroding everything, Nidhogg, the World Serpent. An ultimate dark lightning spear also took shape in his left hand. He raised the 2 spears high and shot them at the Mad Owl in midair. However, when faced with an attack of this level, the Mad Owl did not move an inch. A vortex of dark water droplets formed in front of him, completely swallowing the 2 forces. The difference in power levels is too great. They're not even on the same level. Odin had no good way to defend against the endless attacks of shadow droplets. Darkness descended from above as Saladin unfurled his shadow curtain, obscuring a section of the sky above the crowd. "Thank you, Your Excellency Saladin." Odin spoke. Before Saladin could speak, a large amount of dark water droplets fell beneath his shadowy curtain, and his expression suddenly changed. Because his shadow was eroded into huge pits. In terms of abilities, he can indeed use his shadow to defend against 2-dimensional attacks. However, the difference in ability index caused his shadow curtain to be directly negated by the energy of the shadow drops, creating a vulnerability. At that moment, sacred chanting arose from the crowd. Sister Leibniz closed her eyes, clasped her hands together, and began to chant with her pink lips open. A copy of the Book of Revelation radiated a divine light before her, and the pages began to turn automatically without any wind. Behind the nun, a dozen or so members of the Knights Templar transformed into a choir, reciting passages from the Holy Scriptures. "May the Lord cover you with his mighty hand as a shield protects the Lamb. May your soul be as firm as Mount Zion, unshaken by the storms of Hades. Ask the Father to grant you the sword of the angels, to cut through all the snares of the evil one, so that your steps may be firm on the heights. May the grace of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit flow like a river, from this time forth and into eternity." The chanting grew louder and louder, drawing upon the faith of countless devout believers of the righteous monarchy condensed within the revelation, creating a massive golden light barrier that blocked the attacks. Everyone present used their own methods, but they all found it very difficult to withstand the attacks of the Mad Owl. The one who bore the brunt of the Mad Owl's attacks was Zhang Yi, who seemed the most nonchalant. He hangs high in the air, protected by all things in nature. Above the sky, in the dark vortex, black ink poured out more and more, as if trying to transform everything before its eyes into a 2-dimensional stain. Zhang Yi's myriad phenomena unfolded, blocking wave after wave of ink attacks. Drip, drip, drip. Drizzling. The surface of the dimensional gate was shimmering, and the ripples were becoming increasingly dense. However, he was unable to break through Zhang Yi's defenses. Laugh. On the core furnace of the End Demon God armor, a crimson energy gem was placed. As the furnace burned it, powerful and scorching energy circulated to all parts of the armor. A dark aura emanated from the armor, and the undead accumulated over millions of years of sacrifice from the Wulwan Empire, let out a wail. Zhang Yi raised his finger and swiftly made a cut from a distance. Dimensional string decomposition, cut it open. Puffed. Before the Mad Owl could figure out what was happening, suddenly his body, which was suspended in the sky, was violently split in two at the waist. This is Zhang Yi's ability. There are no warning signs of an attack, and no discernible trajectory. He can launch this attack anywhere within a 5-kilometer radius of him. Unless we remain vigilant at all times and maintain the highest level of defense, we could be cut into pieces at any moment. When the Mad Owl's body was cut in half at the waist, King Arthur and the others' pupils shrank sharply, and they instinctively clenched their fists. How can chaos be so powerful? Are we ultimately drifting further and further apart? Even with his superpower index reaching 42,000 points, King Arthur was still filled with a sense of powerlessness. You won. The 7 treasures' golden steps on Di Shirtian's body dimmed slightly as he attempted to use his abilities to fight Guang Xiao without anyone knowing. The result was that he was instantly defeated. Seeing Zhang Yi take down Guang Xiao, he silently breathed a sigh of relief. Mad Owl's eyes were filled with confusion as his 2 halves of body plummeted downwards from midair. Zhang Yi planned to use the dimensional gate to catch it. After all, this was a source of superpowers with a superpower index of 50,000 points. But at that moment, Dao Lan shouted, "Watch out, he's not dead." Zhang Yi's eyes narrowed. The Mad Owl's body was already very close to him. Within his left eye, the second hand of time is activated, allowing him to see everything that will happen within the next 5 seconds. He saw the Mad Owl's body fall into his alternate dimension, then quickly explode, turning into a sky full of ink that eroded his alternate dimension. With the help of the demon god armor, Zhang Yi's combat power was able to be raised to the level of fighting against Mad Owl. However, in terms of understanding spatial abilities and pure supernatural abilities, he was ultimately far inferior to his opponent. In a direct clash of abilities, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. Without the slightest hesitation, Zhang Yi instantly used a spatial teleportation technique to create distance between them. Snap! The 2 halves of the Mad Owl's body fell to the ground, exploding everywhere like a pool of liquid. Glug glug. The ink spread rapidly across the land, and a strange bulge emerged from the ink, reforming the shape of a Mad Owl. Dao Lan said to Zhang Yi, "Guang Zhao's ability is to transform himself into an element. The only way to kill him is to completely deplete all of his energy. Even the Black Moon Priest of that year couldn't kill him and let him escape here." Chapter 2357 The Mad Tyrant 2. The cold numbers on Zhang Yi's tactical goggles jumped wildly, finally settling on a solemn number, 50,000 points. Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes. This was the second time he would face an enemy of night level. However, the Mad Tyrant, deprived of national resources and driven to a state of mental madness, was clearly less oppressive than Jinglu. No, it's because he's stronger than before. The resources he gained after conquering the kingdom led to a fundamental leap in his overall strength. Under Ling's guidance, his ability to use his special powers also improved by leaps and bounds. Now he can stand up to the Mad Tyrant. The Mad Owl, a monster that seemed to have crawled out of the abyss of shadows, merely stood there, and the shadow erosion, power emanating from its body, caused the surrounding space to distort and peel away like an oil painting being crumpled by an invisible hand. That was not simple destruction, but a more thorough erasure. The light around him dimmed, sound was swallowed up, and even the basic particles that make up matter lost their dimensions under that strange power, collapsing into absolutely flat, lifeless, two-dimensional shadows. The ground and the broken mountains, once touched by that ink-like shadow, instantly lose their thickness, turning into a rubbing on the wall, retaining the outline of their former lives, yet now eternally silent. Conventional attacks are ineffective. Energy attacks will be two-dimensionalized, but cannot be completely absorbed, so excessive energy attacks will have an effect. Zhang Yi's voice reached the ears of Odin, King Arthur, and the others, calm and undisturbed. However, we can defeat him. Let's join forces and take care of the enemy in front of us first. You help me find out his weaknesses. I'll take the hits for you. As the strongest force in the coalition, Zhang Yi issued the order directly. Regardless of what others think, if they want to live, they must cooperate with Zhang Yi in the fight. Odin had already suffered a heavy blow and believed that his attack was weak and ineffective. With an ability index of 37,000, he seemed unqualified to participate in this great battle. Zhang Yi had pulled too far ahead of him. Zhang Yi was still willing to give him another chance, since having more strength would always increase the chances of winning. Even one more cannon fodder is better than nothing. We have no way out now. We can only fight. Benjamin Morgan's voice came through, accompanied by a rustling sound. In his palm, he handled a thick stack of banknotes with remarkable fluidity, as if they were playing cards. With his luxurious attire, including a pure gold necklace and gemstone rings, he gave off the impression of an incredibly wealthy nouveau riche. This is the president of the Natural Science Association, a major capitalist and financier who controls the economic lifeline of the entire country. Even the abilities gained after the mutation are related to money. Money is his power. The greater his wealth, the stronger his power. The Mad Owl let out a hoarse sneer. He raised his hand, his fingertips flowing with a thick, inky shadow. It is your honor to be a part of my art. Honor? Let Odin's spear show you what divine judgment is. Odin gritted his teeth. Since there was no way out, he could only fight a decisive battle. Lightning flashed in his single eye, and he roared, his divine power surging, ancient runes lighting up on his armor. He raised the eternal spear in his hand, Gungnir. That legendary, infallible spear, now imbued with destructive, dark divine light, shot through the air like lightning tearing through the sky, carrying an unwavering determination. Wherever the gun was pointed, space was pierced through, leaving a scorching vacuum trail. This is an attack imbued with the power of rules, locking onto cause and effect, and is guaranteed to hit the target. However, faced with this earth-shattering attack, Mad Owl simply waved his hand casually. A torrent of shadow ink surged forth as if alive, rushing toward Gungnir. No miracle occurred. The rules seemed to be covered by even stranger rules. The moment the shadowy spear touched the darkness, its speed decreased drastically. Its brilliant light and unparalleled kinetic energy seemed to be cast onto a two-dimensional canvas, quickly becoming flat and dim. In the end, the once mighty Gungnir was reduced to a shadowy spear pattern imprinted on a canvas of shadows, stripped of all its divine power. It fell lightly to the ground, where it was caught by the Mad Owl with 2 fingers and tossed aside. Guaranteed hit? What a joke. On my canvas, there are no traces, no dimensions, so how can there be a guaranteed hit? The Mad Owl's tone was full of mockery. Then, will my attack be effective against you? King Arthur's expression was solemn. He stepped forward and gripped the hilt of the sword of victory and oathed tightly with both hands. A dazzling golden light shot into the sky, a radiance that embodied the spirit of chivalry and the will of the planet, both holy and powerful. He swung his sword, and a crescent-shaped golden sword aura tore through the earth, purifying all filth and striking the Mad Owl. Excalibur. King Arthur roared, and a sword light shot into the sky, heading straight for the Mad Owl. Glory? It's just a more conspicuous paint. The Mad Owl neither dodged nor evaded, and activated shadow erosion once more. The golden sword energy crashed into the shadow ink, and the energy, which was enough to evaporate rivers, was absorbed, decomposed, and flattened as if water had fallen into a sponge. In the end, that magnificent sword aura could not escape the fate of being two-dimensionalized, turning into a golden stream of light embedded in the shadows, leaving only beauty, but no longer capable of causing harm. A heavy atmosphere began to spread. Even attacks at the Black Archon level couldn't cause the slightest harm. How could this battle possibly continue? Zhang Yi remained calm, his myriad forms blocking the way for everyone. Only he could withstand the Mad Owl's attack. He still needs to be observed. The most important factor in defeating a superpowered individual is intelligence. He must find a weakness in the Mad Owl's abilities. Otherwise, no matter how many attacks you launch, They will only slightly weaken the opponent's alien energy and will not cause any real damage. Although Odin and King Arthur's attack failed, it bought him the opportunity to observe. The Mad Owl brandished his greatsword, aimed it at the crowd, and mercilessly slashed down. Boom! The black vortex in the sky poured down like a flood, its viscous spatial power capable of obliterating all three-dimensional matter. Zhang Yi opened his palms and pointed them towards the sky. Suddenly, the dimensional gate transformed into a massive semicircular barrier, blocking all the attacks that were about to strike them. Drizzling. Above the dimensional gate, black raindrops gradually appeared, representing the mutual annihilation of the spatial power of the compressed dimension of the Mad Owl and the power of the dimensional gate of Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi thought to himself, if I were to fight him purely in a battle of supernatural energy, even if I won, it would be a crushing defeat. It's too dangerous here. I can't take the risk. I need to find a safer way to win. Chapter 2358, The Mad Tyrant 3. Just as Zhang Yi was pondering, a gentle voice rang in his ear. Lord Chaos, can you shatter his body again? Zhang Yi's eyes darted around and met a pair of beautiful, compassionate eyes. He is one of the 4 knights of the apocalypse of the Holy See. Plague Knight, Leibniz. Zhang Yi didn't even ask about their plans because time was of the essence. Everyone present was an elite of humanity, and he chose to trust them. All right. Zhang Yi's gaze was as sharp as a knife as he stared intently at the Mad Owl in the sky, who was battling him with spatial power. The power of the mind begins to calculate the other party's coordinates. The supernatural power within his body began to operate in an unprecedented way. It was no longer about spatial travel, but something deeper, touching upon the very foundations of the world, dimensional string unraveling. He pressed down with one hand, and without any warning, the space in front of him suddenly changed within a fixed dimensional dimension. The dimensional reference string, invisible to the naked eye, was pulled away without warning under his control. This is not an attack, but a deconstruction. He temporarily separated the Mad Owl and the shadow power around it from the current stable 3-dimensional spatial structure, breaking them down into more basic constituent units. The Mad Owl once again felt the stability of the space around him collapsing. The force was not directly opposing his two-dimensionality, but was shaking the foundation of his existence. The viscous shadow ink froze for a moment, as if it had lost its supporting surface. Puffed. Even with his defensive preparations, Guang Xiao couldn't comprehend what kind of ability Zhang Yi had unleashed. His body, unsurprisingly, was severed once more. Moreover, this time, it wasn't just a matter of cutting him in half. It was the power of more than a dozen dimensional strings that cleaved him into pieces. Then, bang, he transformed into a shower of ink, splashing across the sky. There was no flying blood and flesh, no energy explosions. Instead, an extremely bizarre scene unfolded. The Mad Owl transformed into a huge, viscous, constantly writhing and expanding pool of pure black ink, which was splashed into the air. The ink seemed to possess a life of its own, or like an abyss freed from its constraints, exuding an ominous aura and beginning to try to coalesce again. The light radiating energy shone upon it, but it was completely swallowed up, without even a reflection. It was absolute darkness. It worked. King Arthur gripped his sword tightly, watching the writhing darkness warily. No, it just disrupted his form. Zhang Yi said coldly, his essence is intact, and this thing is being reorganized. He looked at Leibniz, who was clasping his hands together, about to cast a spell. Now it's your turn. A low, mournful chant, seemingly filled with endless sorrow, rose from the edge of the battlefield. It is a mourning for Sister Leibniz. She had been standing quietly to the side, like a background figure, but now she slowly raised her head. Clear tears streamed down her beautiful eyes, which held no hatred or fear, only pity. Anyone could feel a heart-wrenching sadness and deathly stillness in her eyes. She extended her pale finger, pointing to the spreading ink, and softly uttered the true name of her power. The grief of mourning. An invisible force, unseen by the naked eye, but clearly perceptible to all living beings, spread out. It wasn't an energy surge, but rather a kind of rule-based plague, a death curse targeting existence itself. The air seemed to be filled with the fragrance of grave soil, carrying a sense of decay and end. When this force swept over Zhang Yi and the others, it only made them feel a strange sense of sorrow and palpitations, but when it touched the ink that the Mad Owl had transformed into, an astonishing change occurred. Sizzle. It was like strong acid being splashed, or like a scalding hot iron being burned onto ice. The ink, which was originally a single, solid mass, suddenly began to boil and churn. Countless tiny bubbles, resembling wailing faces, appeared on the surface of the ink, emitting a subtle yet sharp hiss. Signs of contamination and erosion are clearly visible. The expansion and recombination of the ink slows down suddenly, and some areas even begin to become dark and thin, as if they have lost their vitality. Amidst the swirling ink came the Mad Owl's painful and furious mental roar. The power of this grief was able to directly affect his non-physical, almost conceptual form of existence. This plague does not harm the body or destroy energy, but directly accelerates the decay and end of existence, making it one of the nemesis of individuals like him who rely on special forms for survival. This is the true meaning of a plague, the ability to inflict extreme trauma, a power more terrifying than direct death. The intense pain and primal trauma forced the Mad Owl to abandon its unsustainable ink form. The pitch-black ink rapidly contracted and condensed inward, as if time had reversed, and in the blink of an eye, it transformed back into human form. But the reappearing madman was paler, his breathing was obviously disordered, and his eyes showed not only rage, but also a hint of fear. He stared intently at Leibniz. "Damn plague spreader, how dare you?" As expected, these creatures that can transform their bodies into elements are most afraid of area of effect attacks. So, a glint of light flashed in Zhang Yi's eyes. Leibniz's attack confirmed his conjecture. While the owl's ink form was bizarre and difficult to harm, it was not invincible and might even expose other weaknesses. In particular, it has low resistance to rule-based attacks involving state of existence. "I know how to deal with this guy. Once again, crush him." Zhang Yi raised the corners of his mouth and was the first to strike, his fingers cutting through the air like a sharp sword. Dimensional string analysis has already been launched. "Clear," Odin whispered, but his divine power remained immense. Thunder and storm condensed into a giant warhammer in his hand, which crashed down. Excalibur. King Arthur held nothing back, his golden sword gleaming once more, this time with a clear target, the true form of the Mad Owl. Benjamin Morgan grinned, revealing a mouthful of gold teeth that gleamed dazzlingly. "Large cash payment." He waved his hands forward, and a deluge of gold banknotes poured out of his palms, shooting towards the madman's body like machine guns. Lone City's spiral ants unleashed thunderous power, and Daolon transformed into a black dragon, gathering surging flames that sprayed intensely hot fire toward Kuang Zhao's chest. The others followed suit, with Zhang Yi as the main force, launching a continuous offensive against Kuang Zhao. Zhang Yi's attacks were not just difficult to dodge, they were impossible to avoid. The only option was to take them head-on. The Mad Owl had become cunning, forming a protective layer of black ink around its body. However, facing the combined attack of more than a dozen bishop-level superhumans, he is currently unable to maintain a full-force defense. After all, he was no longer the Grand General of the Dark Moon Empire. Years of spiritual pollution and erosion in the Dark Sun Forest have left his power depleted. Dear viewers, thanks for staying with me. We'll try to get you more updates. Please like and subscribe and share the video with your friends. Love you all.